Hey TV fans, Bored now back with you. On this video I return to Stranger Things 5 and this is gonna be my overview of Volume 2. So because I've gotten to this a bit late, it came out over Christmas when I was away, then I've decided then I'll just do all 3 episodes from the second volume on one video, but I will still talk about them individually. The plan is now that when the finale comes out in a couple of days now in the UK, I think technically it's tomorrow in the US, but UK time it'll be really the day after. But when that hits, I will watch it and then I'll do a video. I was left in a positive place from Volume 1. The cliffhanger with Will and Vecna I thought was fantastic and a great teaser for what was to come in the next parts. And there was a lot of good stuff in Volume 1. I think I enjoyed all the episodes with the odd nitpick, which you're always going to have, but mostly I was very positive on Volume 1. Chapter 5, the first episode back, was called Shock Jock, and nothing to do with Robin in a twist because of her acting as a DJ. You thought maybe the titles can have something to do with that. It actually doesn't. One was a mixed bag for me. Like, there was stuff I really liked, stuff I wasn't so keen on. There's some stuff which I thought, okay, that didn't seem that great at the time, but then depending on where it's going, because it does feel like some of it is like set up stuff, but there's definitely conflicting stuff in the episode, and you can almost divide the plots really, because the Cadiel stuff I was very sort of middling on. Like, a lot of that stuff seemed very plodding and you get like a big exposition dump. Quite a big complaint in the stuff with Dustin and his group, which I will get to, but that's kind of on the same side of things because the Hopper group and the Dustin group are of course both in the Upside Down. Most of the stuff with the Vecna and Will Max plots I really enjoyed in this episode. I thought there was a lot of really good stuff with that. So I'm a bit conflicted. I would say it's a solid episode, but there were frustrations. So let's get my biggest frustration out the way, shall we? Frustrated with the Steve and Dustin stuff in this episode. So they go off book, their group, Steve, Dustin, Nancy, Jonathan, because Hopper and Elle meant to be meeting them at the church in the Upside Down. And there's lots of cool, I like them, you getting all these landmarks in the Upside Down. But Dustin has other plans all of a sudden, like they decide to head to the research lab looking for this one particular generator which they believe could help to save Holly. So the boys squabble over who's gonna go with who, like when they split up, and this is the start of my frustration. Steve doesn't want to go with Dustin or Jonathan. Big shock there. Jonathan takes a jibe at Steve for naturally wanting to go with Nancy. Hey, you're moving in on my woman again. Grow the fuck up, Jonathan. Nancy points out that we don't have time for all this, and she's quite right. She's the only one acting like a mature adult in that scene. Paired off with her boyfriend, Jonathan then starts complaining that she hesitated before choosing him. Once again, grow the fuck up, Jonathan. Nancy says, if I'm holding stuff back, so are you. And this is where the fourth drama was starting to come in a little bit. Not that I mind a bit of relationship drama, but it didn't really seem like the right time. And as I said, it just seemed to be a little bit forced. Dustin stuff really reaches its peak when it comes to them having a complete bust off and fighting, because they go back and forth about whose fault the current predicament is. Because Steve blames Dustin because of him going down the dark path with like the bullies and then all the things that led to. Dustin takes a pop shot at Steve still harbouring feelings for Nancy and not putting it aside when they're on this mission. What was really weird was Steve taking a swipe at Eddie, like really mocking him, or close to mocking him, because he was saying things like he was just playing a hero, like he died for nothing, or all the rest of it. And it just seemed really callous. And the way it played in the scene is that Steve was jealous of Eddie, and that he believed he came between him and Dustin. And Dustin just goes nuts at that point. Like, he lunges at Steve and, yeah, really wails away. And Steve eventually, like, I think he's more taken aback, but he's like, okay, calm down. And they just go their separate way. But yeah, he really has to fight Dustin off. The thing I can think is that maybe he's doing it as a way to try and get Dustin to open up emotionally. Like, maybe he's bottling all this up, but it didn't really play like that in the scene. So it did feel that it was a little bit extreme of a left turn for Steve to be doing that, because it's really in poor taste, especially when Eddie died and all that. But that's the only reading I can have, which maybe justifies it a bit, is that he is doing it to get Dustin to open up. Speaking of Steve, I did enjoy the Return of the Jedi reference, so that was really good when Dustin's laying out the plan and he's using the analogy of Return of the Jedi, how like it's probably the weakest of that original trilogy, but hey, the kids all love it. And Steve calls the Ewoks teddy bears. That was really funny. That was good stuff. And I will say the cliffhanger to the episode, which involves this group, is really, really fun as well, because when Dustin and Steve get separated, Dustin comes across all these writings in like a lab, so like these scientific writings, and it's not revealed in the episode what they're saying, but suddenly he realizes then, like, shooting generator, which is the plan, isn't going to kill Vecna. It may just kill them. It may just bring the end of the world. Frantically screaming on his walkie-talkie to Jonathan and telling him and Nancy, no, you can't do it, it'll probably kill us. And he's saying something to do with this has nothing to do with black magic, this has to do with science. Radio communication, because, hey, plot reasons, isn't very clear to Jonathan. Generator, basically. It's a really good visual, actually, the way it's done. It's on top of this tower, and it all looks very, like, cinematic. Nancy's got a shotgun at the ready, as always, and Jonathan's like, are you sure about this? She's like, no, and she shoots anyway. Cliffhanger. End of episode. That was cool. That was a fun little cliffhanger. Some good, some bad, but there's promising things in it. So, just to talk a bit about the Callie L stuff, it was pretty cool, the trick which Callie pulls on to Kay, because we see when the military are cleaning up the lab, and at first it looks like Callie's body is still there, but it turns out to be a trick. Like, they've done a visual trick where it makes it look to them then the body is still there. I'm on the fence about this character because of the fact that I didn't like that season 2 episode. I wasn't really bowled away by the character in that episode. Me and Madison both said that reveal was a little bit weak on the anticlimactic side. Scenes were a bit plodding, where you get a big long exposition dump, and I'm not sure the actress is the best. Like, it does feel like she's a little bit one note, but the big idea that comes out of this scene is then Callie explains then Dr. K is carrying on Popper's work, basically. So the reveal is then when she got kidnapped and they killed her friends, what a shame that is, then they started draining Callie of her blood. And the idea was they drained her of her blood so that they could create more people like Henry, like her, like Elle. The description of like vampires was a really good one. So Callie suggests Vecna gave her and Eleven their powers originally, and this is something Al denies and disagrees with. Because one of the things that Callie in this episode starts suggesting is that even if they kill Henry slash Vecna, then that won't be the end of it. There's more to it than that. Because Al's trying to talk her into it. It's like, help me find Vecna, we can kill him, and then we can be set free. And Callie's not really buying that. She says there's more to it than that. So that's intriguing, because it just suggests that maybe there's a little bit more to it than, okay, Vecna's the big bad, you kill him, and that solves the problem. A couple of promising ideas in that side of things as well. But jump into the really meaty stuff of the episode and the big stuff. And Vecna is now in Will's head. And a fun twist from the end of episode 4 is that even though Will saved all his friends from being killed, Vecna still took the kids, all 12 of them, including Derek, the kids who he's saying he's going to use to shape the new world. So that was a fun little twist, because I assumed that they were all saved. The visual of the kids waking up and walking into Vecna's house. Again, this is very dreamlike style. You can see why the kids are seduced by Henry's world and the gifts that he gives to them and all the rest of it. And of course, Holly has gone back into the house at this point. Max has sent her back because she says, you can be my spy. Nervous, Holly asks Vecna if he plans on recruiting any more children. And he's very cryptic, but he implies something big is coming tomorrow. And that's setting up the next episode, because tomorrow is the anniversary of Will's disappearance, which we've already learned this season is going to be a big date. Holly returns to the woods, and Max says she needs her to go back, and it seems like someone's following them. Luckily enough, it was only Derek. It was dipshit Derek. And I did enjoy the back and forth. I enjoyed Max and Derek meeting for the first time, where they're both like, who are you? That was fun. Derek defends himself, saying he's no longer dipshit Derek, but he's now delightful Derek. Not bad. And I kind of love Holly's response, where she's like, well, we need dipshit Derek right about now. That's a fun way to turn it back on him. Derek is still a little bit grating, I've got to say. He was one of the weaker parts of the episode. I think once he gets involved with the plan, he's a bit more acceptable. To use him as bait to distract Vecna, Max tells him, head towards the cave because you'll be safe there. So a lot of this Max stuff I was enjoying, because you start to get some good proactive plans, you get a bit of strategy, there's a little bit of tension there, some good world building, and there's some good stuff in this part of the episode. Max tells Holly they need to find the memory of when Holly was first taken, and that'll probably be a way to escape eventually. So they go back to Halloween night. This is one of the coolest moments of the episode. Holly is watching Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and of course it's that scene. Welcome to primetime, bitch!
This is it, Jennifer. Your big breaking TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch.
Love it. Holly's got great taste. She's just gone up in my book. Holly says that she didn't know Henry on Halloween, so that's a bit weird to worry, because just because you didn't see him then doesn't mean he wasn't around and that he couldn't see you. We get a visual of Henry at the window spying in, and what I'm sure is going to become a meme is Max like flipping him off. Finally, Holly remembers that the first time she met Henry was in the library, so he approached her and he kind of buttered her up by saying, I like the same book as you. Creepy but effective. That's an oldie but a classic. Henry confronts Derek in the woods, threatens to kill him, to kill his family if he doesn't tell him where he got that map. That was there's some good horror scenes in this episode. By the way, it's directed by Frank Darabont again, who directed another episode this season. Horror scenes, whatever the case, because the gruesome visuals of like Derek's family appearing to him as like dead basically was really well done. Vecna catches up with Max and Holly because they're about to go through a door and basically escape. He slams the door on him, and there's some good horror style moments here. I really loved the visual of Henry and Vecna, the two sides of the character, switching back and forth, almost like it's some sort of a baseball card or like a TV crackling and switching back and forth. Good horror movie lines. I told you, Holly, never go into the woods. And it's sort of funny that he's still trying to convince her that Max is the villain, the real monster, and he's actually on her side. And I think even Holly isn't buying it at that point. He also says about Max, at last the fox is caught. Things are really amping up towards the end. So jumping over to the Will side of things, one of my favourite little scenes, which is just like a little gem of a scene this episode, is the Sinclair siblings both coming up with a plan at the same time, but it's a completely different plan, and they come up with it through different ways. So Erica sees a poster of Mr. Clark, the science teacher, and they decide in the absence of Dustin they need the smartest science nerd in Hawkins, who basically taught Dustin everything he knew. Lucas has the idea, when heating up the popcorn, to reuse the sauna test which they used on Billy in season 3. They both mock each other's ideas, but Joyce says, why don't we try both of them? Very nice idea from Joyce to combine the two ideas. It's a very motherly thing to do as well, isn't it? Like finding a compromise between the two kids. But that was a really fun Sinclair moment, because at first I thought they were gonna both have the same idea, but it's actually quite a nice swerve. Then they come up with different ideas and they both have their own way of thinking of them. It was good symmetry. Then it was the two Sinclairs. Back to season 3 was a lot of fun as well, and it makes sense, especially since Lucas has a personal connection to Max. Joyce putting faith in Will was a very good moment as well. Something this season has been building to, where she's really put Will in protective clothing as much as possible this season. She's been very nervous about letting him go off and hatch plans and put himself in harm's way, but this is the one moment where she says, okay, I trust you, son, you can do this, you are the key. Will asks more about Robin's coming out moment. That's another decent little scene between them. Will is only the third person to know. To his shock, the first person is Steve, and you can clearly see Will is thinking about his own coming out moment as well. This was a decent scene. I think maybe you could have had it at another time. You could have had it in another episode, maybe, when things weren't ramping up to the big plan so much. It felt like a bit of odd placement, but it was a decent scene. They get one of the creatures and they have this idea for the Frankenstein style experiment, which is basically a version of the sauna test, but they use a dead, let's just call it a mind flare, and they link it up to Will, and they're shooting electric volts into it to resuscitate it, very much like Frankenstein, and they're making Frankenstein references. Mike even has a line which is pretty close to his version of "It's alive, it's alive." So hoping to connect Will to the hive mind and Vecna, Will actually ends up inside Derek's head and sees the kids surrounding him. And from this he figures out that Max is with Holly and that they're being targeted by Vecna/Henry. So that's quite a big moment for Lucas, because this is the first time that he's obviously heard anything about Max being out there somewhere. So Will eventually leaps inside Henry and Vecna, because through Derek he's able to track them down, get inside his body. They wrestle for control with each other, which is very satisfying to watch. And he uses this to send a message to Max, which is basically run. So the visual of them struggling is awesome. And Vecna tries to struggle back. He says to Will, get out. But just them talking in unison, like the words run, which Will is screaming, comes out of Vecna's mouth. So that was a really fun moment. Very trippy, but pretty cool, as I said. When things start going wrong and Will collapses, the group shoot the Mind Flare's energy back up the tower. So I think this is to revive him and hopefully wake Will up. So there you have it. That's the episode. As I said, some ups and downs, but the cliffhanger was fun, and a lot of what they were doing with the Will and Max stuff I thought was a lot of fun as well.
At long last, the fox is caught. Need to run!
To episode 6, Escape from Comatose, and now volume 2's really cooking. This episode was fantastic. It may be the best episode of the season so far, and you know what, one day I'll definitely do an episode rankings and do a special top 10 episodes, and who knows, this episode may make it into my top 10 overall, because I did really love it. It pays off a lot of big moments. It's a very emotional episode. Some great emotional moments, some great drama, some great action, some great tension, high stakes, all the rest of it. I thought this was a great episode, and I've got very little, if anything, to complain about. There's always things you can nitpick here and there, but I'm not really going to bother because I am so positive on this one. So let's start with the Jonathan, Nancy, Steve, Dustin group, because that stuff really picks up this episode also. So the cliffhanger from the last episode, of course, Nancy shoots up into the air, and there's some great visuals, like the stuff in the Upside Down with these characters in this episode. You can really tell where the budget has gone this season, and when people question about the scale of Stranger Things now and how much more big and epic it is, you can point to scenes like this and saying, well, they really justify it, don't they? Because it's a very distinct look to these scenes where you've got like blue electric sparks in the sky. I love the deadpan reactions when Jonathan's like, maybe you missed, when nothing happened, and just Nancy's sarcastic look, almost like, really? Is that what you think I missed? You kidding me? That was really funny. She can tell so much just through a simple look like this. But yeah, it just has this very apocalyptic, eye-catching look to what's happening in the sky. And we get this wall which is dividing the two groups of characters. Red on one side, you get very much icy looking things on the other side. So Dustin tells Steve that Vecna didn't build the wall. It was sonic science, as he calls it, describing it as like a wormhole in space and time. So I was getting like Star Trek Deep Space Nine vibes from that description. So Dustin claims that if the bridge is destroyed, then the group disappear forever into space and time. Dustin is so back now, like really getting on it with the science and explaining this stuff and upping the stakes as well. There's a lot of mythology building in this episode, like a lot to keep on top of, but so much of it was really satisfying and it made sense, or enough of sense, then I didn't really mind. Dustin again does a great job of explaining it. I also love his delivery of death when Steve asks what's on the other side of the wall. That was a great delivery. The two pairs are separated, as I said. Jonathan and Nancy fall into this room, which has like a gooey paint-like substance. I wasn't quite sure what that was meant to be, but I'm not going to complain. It looked fucking fantastic, dripping from the walls. The visual of the room crumbling was really satisfying to see. Dustin and Steve trapped in this other room with like heat-type effects. Dustin has an emotional moment when he hugs Steve as Steve trying to go up some stairs, I think it was, to try and get into the other room. But Dustin is almost certain he'll never see Steve again if he disappears. So he hugs him and says, "I can't lose you again." And I almost got the impression he was projecting there and he was talking about when Eddie died, maybe. So, but they have a nice little moment and they are kind of back now on good terms and working together. So very, very nicely done, and continues the theme a little bit with Dustin. And you know what? You know this episode is working when it makes me care about bloody Jonathan and Nancy. Something I haven't since about episode 2, season 2. Maybe 3 at a stretch. The moment in this one is just beautiful. The way it's shot all close up, light in the background, etc. They finally communicate with playful truths. That's what I love about it. I hate the clash from Nancy, maybe the line of the episode. And it's always so much fun when they do callbacks to previous seasons. That they sort of give a bunch of truths. Jonathan says, "I don't like reading your essays. I hate reading them." Nancy later says, "I never read Slaughterhouse-5, just the Cliff Notes," which was a great add-on there. And Nancy then is completely honest about what was going on with her and Steve in season 4. She said she did tell a little white lie to Jonathan that she could have made a choice not to go with Steve and his group, but she needed someone else. There's a gag about Steve having better hair than Jonathan. I wonder if that's a little bit of a wink and a nod to the audience because of how much everyone loves Steve on the internet. She says he's a great guy, but it was never like that with him. Second time around, I'm guessing she's saying. He knows what he wants. Kids and marriage. She brings up the stuff from season 4. But I don't know what I want. This is a great, very realistic, relatable moment from Nancy. Because it's that idea of sometimes when you're in a long-term relationship like her and Jonathan, and also it's long distance, which puts a strain on it. I didn't really like you when you were getting high, referring back to Argyle. So I can definitely sympathise with that from Nancy. But yeah, it's very relatable that maybe she did seek out some other attention, some other male attention, or wanted to revisit the old relationship with Steve, maybe just to see if there was anything still there, but maybe more so than it's just a male company that you can just be friends with, and maybe there's a little bit of heart to heart without it going too far. And I think everyone can relate from that up. I think it's Nancy brings up that our history is sort of weighed down upon us because we're so sort of have this intense history. So all that was really great. It's so well written, some great drama, which I just didn't see coming from Nancy and Jonathan because I haven't been invested in them for so long as like a couple. So this was fantastic writing. It was such a moving scene, really well shot. And then Jonathan reveals he's had this wedding ring for ages, which he's been planning on proposing to Nancy with. And there's this whole gag about, will you marry me? Will you accept my non-proposal? And as I said, it's all very moving, very well done. Short bit with Erica and Murray. I just drop it in here because it's again on the science theme, because they drop in on Mr. Clark and his librarian girlfriend at like 5 a.m, and there's this gag about Cuddles or something, or Snuggles, I think it was she called him, something like that, the girlfriend. So that was fun. He's freaked out because he doesn't know who Murray is. Like, it's like, who's this 40-something-year-old guy with Erica? That this is a bit weird. But yeah, Erica's there. They want his help with the science stuff. So that's just a short bit with them in this episode that we will return to next time. So we jump to the even more important stuff this episode, because we arrive to November 6th, aka the anniversary of Will's disappearance. And I'm probably going to be jumping around the plots a little bit here. Evan has a better episode this time. I think she does play a more important role. Her and Hopper in the Upside Down this season, it's been a little bit on the downturn compared to some stuff. I liked the way the season opened with 11, with her training for the crawl and that whole thing, but some of the stuff since then has been a little bit hit and miss. I'm not too worried though, because I know there is big stuff coming for her in the final reckoning and all that. It probably makes sense, and with it being the final season, then it's time to really give Will some massive stuff, the sort of stuff that probably 11 was getting in the previous seasons. But I know she's going to play a big part in the shake-up. Anyway, her and Hopper are reunited with Joyce and that whole group. Will is still in the coma. Them arriving in the hearse. Hopper, it's a long story, he says. Hopper fights with Callie over 11 when she claims she's in a weaker place. She calls her Jane, of course, is in a weaker place to be prepared for the big fight, and she blames that on Hopper. Hopper accuses Callie of putting negative thoughts into 11's head, referring to Callie claiming that bringing Vecna down won't save the world. Sort of tit for tat, really. Mike does another strong inspirational speech to 11, saying when it's all over we leave Hawkins. That's where you get the line from the trailer where 11 says, well, this isn't one of your big election type speeches, one of your campaigns. It's not really that simple. But Mike is very positive and on message. He's very much, maybe not, but we're going to do this. We're going to start by saving Will, and it's all going to go to plan. So I really love Mike's positivity and inspirational speeches this season. They're really paying off. By the way, Callie is listening to all this at the door, and I think we're meant to think that she's getting a bit jealous, because it's like, oh, they're planning for life outside of this. Does that mean I'm not going to factor in? So they're definitely playing Callie on both sides. Like, you're not quite sure whether she can be trusted or not. So that's a whole thing, which is something I thought they might do. One of the most beautiful scenes in the episode is Hopper to Joyce when he supports her, because Joyce is beating herself up about letting Will go to Vecna and how that all went wrong. And Hopper says, one of the things you learn about being a parent is that all your plans are the wrong plans. It's not your fault, Joyce. That was just beautiful. Max is so raised for this stuff as we get deeper into the Max and Holly stuff, and I really love the mythology building in this episode and all the different back and forths and the tension of everything. So Vecna claims that the cave will no longer be a safe place for Max and Holly. Things has changed, he says. So this is a good example of what I'm talking about. Max says he's bluffing, Holly isn't so sure and doesn't want to take a chance, having the idea to use Henry's mind as like a map to try and find the exit. X marks the spot, which Holly learned from her uncle and his adventures when she was even younger, I guess. So that's great stuff. I love that there's that conflict where Max is saying one thing, no, he's bluffing. Holly is saying, I'm not sure if he is. We can't just sit around here. So she's being proactive. She's coming up with plans. I like that she's using strategy that she learnt from her uncle, because that's all very personal. And again, it's a very tangible visual of things, of them hunting around for this particular spot. It all works very nicely, and there's this great tension of is Vecna bluffing or not, and Vecna is torturing Will with his tentacles, and he forces him to be a spy one last time to track Max in the real world. So that is his plan, so it seems that he wasn't bluffing. 11 gets in the deportation tank once again. Great callback. I love when they return to things like that. And ultimately she is able to free Will from Vecna. So that's a good use of 11, because only she can really do that. Will tells them about how he got to Max. So Robin has an interesting theory that Max was never in a coma. She was in a trance, like all of Vecna's victims. The idea is that if you wake one up, the rest will come out too. So this is where the two sides of the plot merge very nicely. Lucas and Robin head to the hospital to try and revive Max, but Vecna basically has the same idea. His idea is that if he goes to the hospital and finishes off Max and kills her, then that solves the problem, really. So he sends his demodogs, of course, to the hospital to try and kill Max. Holly's plan seems to work out, though, as her and Max stumble upon a hole. They uncover a memory of a young Henry killing a man in self-defense. Holly believes this may have been the moment Henry turned to the dark side. Now that's interesting. Not that it matters that much, but again, it's more kind of mythology building. Robin and Vicky fight over Robin not being 100% truthful. Robin is caught by the military, but their body count grows again, people, as the demodogs take them out. Robin warns Lucas that the demodogs are coming for Max as he's trying to stir her with the good old Kate Bush. Plenty of royalties again for Kate Bush in this episode. He has no choice but to lift her up and take her to the lift as they hide from the dogs. So this is where the stakes are really getting high again. Some great horror direction, them hiding away from the dogs in the hospital. You get like the flashing sort of neon lights. It's all very good stuff. And Robin apologizes to Vicky for lying to her. Vicky says, "I'm sorry for not believing you, not trusting you," and Robin promises to take her a date they were due. And it's the sort of thing you say when you think, well, maybe we could die in a moment. She tells Lucas that he has to turn Kate Bush off, but Lucas wants to give Kate Bush more royalties because he believes Max is starting to stir. So as I said, fantastic tense scene, gripping horror. And in all the chaos, Karen comes out of her coma. Now, I wasn't quite sure why she came out of the coma. I guess we're meant to think it's just maybe a coincidence, because I know they said about coming out of the hive mind, and you know, like if you revive one, then the others maybe. So it might be something to do with that, because Max was starting to be revived. But then again, Karen isn't really one of Vecna's victims. Technically, Karen comes out of it at this point, and I'm glad she did, because she gets one hell of a bad ass moment saving them, where she sets some detonators in, like, I think they're like, it was either microwave or washing machines. I think it was washing machines, but that's the thing that blows up the demodogs and saves them. And Karen walking through the fire is so badass, so that's cool. Another nice little moment for Karen there. Is Ted alive? Has he come out of his coma? Who cares, really? Max hears the music and knows she's close to getting home. She tells Holly she has to find her own way out, because Max's memory is her own, of course. And this is great logic. This makes perfect sense. Sadie Sink is so great in this scene, and the whole speech to Holly is just beautiful, and it's just, they've really paid it off. They've stretched it out, a lot of drama and tension, and it's proved to be a very compelling plot. This has justified them keeping Sadie Sink around and Max around and building this whole storyline, because this all pays it off. Sadie Sink does a great job in this. So she says she was lost before Holly helped her. Heroic Holly isn't just a toy, it's you. Absolutely beautiful. She says she never needed Kate Bush, and neither do you, because she's talking about how Lucas being there for her was like that was the emotional rock she needed. And it's a message almost of like hope, faith, friendship, all the rest of it. And Holly, you just need to find yours. But she tells Holly, go and hide somewhere in the Upside Down. Very similar to what happened with Will in the original season, where he had to hide in the Upside Down to try and survive. So similar thing with Holly than Max's Town. Sadie Sink is fantastic in this scene, and Holly's doing a good job as well. But we get a beautiful dual shot of Holly and Max both running separately. Max finally heading home, of course, and that's the climactic end to the episode. Wonderful episode, wonderful ending, a really great emotional payoff. Loved this episode. I loved everything that was happening with Max, Holly, Vecna, and the stuff at the hospital was really well done, and great to see Karen back as well. Fantastic stuff. This is my favourite episode of the season so far. Episode 7 and the last of Volume 2 is, of course, The Bridge. Full spoilers again. And let's just talk about the elephant in the room to get it out of the way, shall we? This big Will coming out scene, which, although I did my best to avoid spoilers, it was pretty much hard to, the way the internet was jumping on this. Certain parts of the internet, who, as far as I could tell, very toxic in many ways, very negative about it, review bombing the episode, partly based on this scene. I'm not saying it's the only reason, but it seems to be a big reason when you see some of the headlines and some of the negativities around it and everything. And it's a scene which you can talk about really without diving into the rest of the episode, because it works on its own. There is a certain context for it. But it was a funny experience watching the episode. I didn't know everything that was in the scene, but I obviously had heard about the scene, and we've known for a while that Will is gay, secretly gay, and that he was wrestling with his sexuality. It's been a big theme in this season. So I was kind of waiting for it to come in the episode, and I had a bizarre experience where it was very late in the episode it actually happened, so I was starting to question if it was. So the context for it was the reason Will wants to tell his friends and Joyce before Vecna does. So Vecna knows his secret. So that's the context, as he explains to Joyce, that Vecna's inside his head, so he actually knows. So it's this idea of a monster knowing your personal secrets, like this secret that you've been struggling with hiding away. And Will wants to control the narrative. He doesn't want Vecna to let the cat out of the bag. So it makes sense within context of what it is, and it's obviously a big moment for Will. But what's funny about it, and the fuss that's been made about it online, is the episode's an hour and 5 minutes, so pretty lengthy episode. And I was expecting a longer scene for this big coming out moment. And it's a pretty short scene, I've got to say. I didn't time it, but I think it was 5 minutes, something like that overall. Not very long at all, and that's really nothing considering the episode is just over an hour. I know the Duffer Brothers have hinted that some scenes were maybe a little bit rushed. I don't know if that's them being misquoted, or they might not even have been making a big stink about that, but that's something they have mentioned. And maybe this was one, because it did feel like for such a big scene it could have been a little bit longer. But I mean, when you see how short it actually is, and then they move on to the big plan afterwards, it makes it even more ridiculous than the internet are causing such a fuss over it. So he gives this quite long speech, which again was much longer originally. The stuff about the Lucky Charms, about Steve Martin, so he shares many of his friends' interests, but then he is different ultimately, and one way he's different is he doesn't like girls. And of course this is something some people like Jonathan had already cottoned on to, and they all slowly embrace him. It starts with Joyce, And then the rest follow them saying, you'll never lose us. They all hug him. It's a big emotional thing. I will say, actually, Robin in some ways steals the scene. Not for the first time this season, because she has that cool line about, guess you didn't need the truth serum after all. And I like to think that Robin also knew. But yeah, they've all got his back. Will pours his heart out. Now, I know the actor at times is a little bit limited emotion-wise, so he probably struggles a little bit, but I think you could see that this was coming from quite a raw place in the episode. And the scene works, I just think it's a little bit rushed. Like, the context of it works, and there's some nice lines, but it was a bit rushed, so that would be my complaint about the scene. And, I mean, that may piss the trolls off even more, suggesting it could have been like even longer. It wasn't long at all, it is my point of it. I probably will do a separate video talking about this sort of thing, but it's a solid scene. It works within context, and I'm sure they may come back to it anyway, but there you have it. So moving on to other things in the episode, because that's the other thing, is like Will quickly goes to the big plan, because he then tells Eleven, I know you have the power to defeat Vecna, because that's something Eleven has been doubting herself over this season, and they quickly move on. So there's lots of nice moments after Max has come out of the coma. She slowly comes out. It's all very emotional. I liked a lot of the smaller scenes with her reuniting with her friends and the lines. Lucas is frantic, of course. She's surrounded by her friends. And at first she can't use her eyes, or her eyes aren't working very well. They're quite numb. And Vicky, who's right there, points out that she hasn't used her eye muscles for quite some time. And that was interesting. And Vicky's another character they folded in quite nicely, who you're just getting little bits here and there. And her support as a nurse, knowing this stuff, is like, it's good to see. It's good to hear her having a little bit moment here and there without, she naturally fits into the group without obviously being like a massive character, because she has been more of a supporting character. As I said, all the individual meetings with Max, once again, quite nicely done. 11, you're really here. I think it gets overlooked how close Max and 11 have come, by the way, and how much they have in common. Mike, took you long enough. Screw you, Wheeler, Max says in response. That popped me, that line, because they had a bit of a rivalry in the past, so that's a fun little bit of banter. And one of the things about this season is that we have had unexpected dynamics at times, and Will and Max was one in this episode. They had some sweet moments, because probably they're two characters who haven't had that many scenes together. And they both have common grounds now, as they share stories about both being inside Vecna's minds. Another pairing you don't see that often, as I said. Mike wants to know where Holly is, of course, and Max doesn't know. She later says to Lucas she regrets leaving Holly in the dream world, but Lucas comforts her and says, you had no choice. It saved the rest of us. Karen learns about the Upside Down for the first time and where Holly is. And again, this is all a bit rushed, but it makes sense because other things are pressing. But it is a big moment, Karen learning about the Upside Down and some of this stuff, and learning where Holly is, which I'll get to in a moment. But she doesn't want to stay in the hospital. She wants to save her daughter. And again, Vicky giving some sound advice as a nurse. She's pointing out, well, you're infected, Karen. You need to rest. You've only just come out of the coma. And once again, Mike steps up. He's having a good season, Mike. I think he persuades his mum to stay in hospital for her own health. He promises Karen they'll save Holly. So let's get to the meaty stuff and some of the explanation of what exactly is happening to Holly and where this world is and she's ended up. Before we get to Dustin's explanation of what exactly is going on, there is some really good stuff with Holly and Vecna in this place wherever she is. So Holly wakes up in a cocoon-like thing. Really fun visual, looks very good and slimy. With the other kids, of course. She escapes and runs into a massive rock-like planet. What the hell is this? And I know some people have nitpicked about how much time we're spending with Holly. I'm totally fine with it. It ups the stakes because of her attachment to Mike and Nancy and also Karen, and it builds up the stakes in her character even more. But this is just an awe-inspiring shot with little young Holly looking out over this apocalyptic type planet. But where is she? That's a great mystery than this scene introduces. Vecna appears, and it's almost like he's coming out of hibernation once again. Steve breaks down the wall to save Jonathan and Nancy, meanwhile, and they were convinced they were dead. And this is leading up to Dustin's theory, by the way. Did they break up or not in the last episode? Because if you read the wiki description, it does describe it as like a breakup, which I never cottoned on to. I thought it was almost like the opposite. But I guess that's what all that unproposal thing could have been about. It's the most beautiful breakup ever, I've got to say, if it was. So Dustin explains that he read Dr. Brannon's notes from 1983. Good continuity there. Wherever Holly is trapped, it's not the upside down, he says. He starts going through the wormhole type thing, so you think in time and space. Is she on another planet, folks? She's certainly high up into the skies, that's for sure. And I kind of like that it's not over-explained. It's left a little bit ambiguous by the end of the episode. Some people might have a problem with that. I don't mind. I got enough of an explanation and hint, really. First, they think it's really a way for Vecna to hide out from them, like going up to this place. But they figure out later it's not really. It's more important he's taking the kids up there, and it's a way to create more rifts in like this abyss, which is what Dustin calls it, which is a good word for it. So he wants to destroy the abyss. He wants to create his own world. And I like this link to the real world and the nickname given to Oppenheimer, because Dustin refers to Vecna as the destroyer of worlds. Drama and visual moments of Holly trying to escape, opening up a patch of the planet, seeing the red light coming through, and then just diving through space and time, or whatever it's meant to be, was very satisfying as well. They work Mr. Clark into it as well. We get his hot air balloon experiments, which Murray starts ragging on at first, but then they see that it pays off, and he actually does locate roughly where Dustin is in space and time. And probably one small complaint, Murray kept going to the snuggles, jibes at poor Mr. Clark, and he just repeated it so many times it got a little bit old after a while. We get a badass 11 moment as she effortlessly powers a patch of Earth into the air. Yeah, I mean, that was, well, what the fuck, 11? That I can believe it because of her powers and how she's moved objects before, but yeah, it was something. It was almost like a show-off moment, 11. Pipe down a bit. And it's so they can get into the upside down. You might question why she hasn't really done this before, but I think because they've located the precise position where Dustin is, then that's sort of why she's doing it now. And as I said, you can definitely believe that she could do it. So it's probably simply then, in a way, a situation hasn't arrived before. Another moment I liked, which is quite a small moment, but I think had to be done, was Steve's apology to Dustin over his kind of Crash Eddie comments. Steve realises he screwed up, and it's a sweet little moment. He says, no, Eddie saved us, he saved you. They both agree they've missed their best friends. You die, I die, as they repeat to each other, which was in the trailer. I absolutely love it. So a nice little rekindling of the bromance, and we see Dustin and Steve once again working together to come up with this plan and help the group. So let's get into the plan itself. Hopper wants to send a chopper up into the abyss. Fly or die is his line. I love it. They question if it's going to be the right size. It sounds like a pretty wacky plan. I'll agree with that. Steve comes up with an alternative plan, and that is to use Al's teleportation powers to go into the abyss and Vecna's mind. A little bit more solid than Hopper's random plan, but still with its faults. They're not quite sure if they can get Al high enough. Nancy says she probably just needs to reach the lab. Callie, who's been quiet all episode, then suggests she helps 11. What's she up to? More on this in a moment. So there's a lot of moving parts to this plan as always, but ultimately it involves Murray's truck and a bomb, which Mike builds. Wait, what the fuck? Where did that come from? To quote Doc Brown out of Back to the Future, this is getting heavy, people.
Whoa, this is heavy.
There's that word again, heavy. Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull?
So to cut a long story short, the ultimate goal of the plan is that Al and Callie will drop the bomb on Vecna when they get high enough. Basically, something like that anyway. Later, Callie and Al mold mine Star Trek style. I do like that. Hopper was right not to trust Callie though. By the way, it's Collie apparently, not Callie, even though it reads as Callie. Callie says even if they destroy the bridge and end Dr. K's experiment, she will just be replaced and the whole thing will start over again. A telltale sign that Callie is maybe acting in her own best interest is that she warns 11 that people close to her, such as Mike, will be killed as a result. Now, this could happen, of course, but Callie has no way of knowing for sure, and it feels like an extreme jump just to try and turn 11's head. Callie says the only way to stop all this for good and for us to be free is that once we've carried out the first part of the plan, we stay up on the bridge, essentially. So we live in our own world and we can control things and be safe, is almost what she's saying, I guess. And 11 is definitely considering this. At the end of the episode, we're not quite sure what 11's going to do, whether she's going to jump. But the thing is, they jump on the back of the van, all of them, they head into the Upside Down, and that's part of the cliffhanger leading into the big finale. So it's unclear which way 11 will go. Now, I don't buy for a minute that 11 is going to leave the others, but of course, with possibly a big death could happen. 11 does seem quite a big candidate at this point, even though many people think they've been to that well and they wouldn't do it to Hopper. I certainly can't see her ending up with Callie, not like this. Maybe it'll be a bit of a tension where eventually Callie will do the right thing and that'll be her arc, but it does seem the only logical move they could have gone with Callie to make her a little bit more interesting as a character, because she's definitely one of the weaker parts of this season for me. And this episode does a little bit more, but ultimately I'm still not completely sold. But this mind mold stuff was quite interesting, at least. One little moment with Dr. K I enjoyed was her anti-Russian propaganda, because she returns to the theme of 11, or the girl, must be captured. She's blaming it all on 11, the poor thing, once again. She did all this. And she mentions the experiments in Moscow and like, well, if it all stayed in there in Moscow, then Russian soldiers would be killed instead of American soldiers. And Hamilton really sells it in the scene. Like, she just nails that delivery and you really believe it, really. So she's a bit in and out of the thing, but what they're leading up to is that she's now continuing on the search for 11, gone back to that, but it's a narrative that even her own soldiers are starting to question though, so we might get some sort of revolt with them. Later on, just switching to Holly to wrap things up, Holly passes out. Henry convinces the other children that Max was in Holly's head and is a monster who took her to the dark side. Basically, everything Henry / Vecna has been doing to Holly and Max, he claims Max has done. This is perfect reverse psychology and a sneaky villain tactic. I can't say I love it because it's bloody nasty and devious, but it is very clever of Vecna, I'll say that, or Henry. Later, when Holly wakes up, she says then Henry's the monster who wants to destroy the world. Only dipshit Derek knows the truth. But he's too afraid Henry will kill his family, so backs up his version of events. A little bit of banter in this scene goes a long way with the kids, I'll say, especially Holly's best friend. When Holly tries to flee the house, things get nasty, and she's almost choked to death by her best friend. That's pretty grim. By the necklace, and she tumbles down the stairs, and that's kind of where we leave off with her, but it means she doesn't escape, crucially. So after we see the others go into the Upside Down for the final battle, the cliffhanger with Holly, as Eleven and co go in, the cliffhanger with Holly, is that Henry/Vecna has the kids around the table, including Holly and Derek, and it's time is the line. He infects their minds, which we've seen so many times. We get the snaps of the body. I don't know if this includes Holly, because obviously at this point she's wised up to him, but I'm assuming because he now has her in position again and he's got the power to do it, then he probably can still infect her mind and take over her body. But this is a perfect little tee up for the finale, so very good ending. The two plots both coming together and the two separate sides, so lots of really good stuff. And I really enjoyed this episode. I don't know if it's the weakest or not. It's definitely not as good as the previous episode, although the difference in ratings shouldn't really be what it is on IMDb. That is kind of crazy, but that's sort of a story for another time, really. So it's been exaggerated. Maybe episode 1 of Volume 2 might be my least favourite, episode 5, but there was still lots of stuff in that I liked. But this is strong anyway. It's doing a lot of good things. I really like the mythology put into the episode. I really like Dustin's theory and just how big and apocalyptic it is and how there's so much riding on it. Once again, some really good science and some more inspiring shots of Holly up on the planet. I think it's a taste thing that some people might want a little bit more of an explanation and things like that, but to me, I was just enjoying it, and I was enjoyed being along for the ride. And yeah, there's lots of little good character moments as well. I think there's some good stuff with Max and the other characters and just their reactions to not seeing her for so long. So there's definitely the odd complaint. They after all the fuss on the internet, they definitely could have made more of that Will moment and made it a little bit of a bigger moment, and I was a little surprised that they hadn't done. But you do wonder if they were a little bit worried about how bad things might be when it comes to the reaction, which is very sad. But it's still a solid little scene, and his reasons for wanting to choose that moment do make sense in the plot. So another good episode for me anyway, and I think it does a neat little job of teeing up the finale, which of course is going to be epic, and I'm excited about. I'm sure it'll be very emotional no matter how things play out. And yeah, I'm a bit undecided if I like Volume 2 quite as much as Volume 1, because I did have a lot of fun with Volume 1, but Volume 1 may be overall a little bit more consistent, and it doesn't quite take the wild swings at times. Like maybe this volume was a little bit more plodding at times and a little bit more hitting you with so much, but so much of it I was enjoying, so I'm really not going to complain too much. I think it does a good job of building to the finale, and of course it has my favourite episode of the season, which was episode 6, which I thought was really emotional, and yeah, just all the Max stuff in that really hit so hard. So there you have it. That's my mammoth thoughts on Volume 2. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always, and we're right on the eve now of the finale of Stranger Things, and I really can't wait to rewatch this show when it's all out, and I will return with my thoughts on the finale soon. Thanks for listening. Keep watching TV. Happy New Year.
I need you to fight one last time. Life has been so unfair to you. Your childhood was taken from you. You've been attacked, manipulated by terrible people. But you never let it break you. Fight for the days on the other side of this. Fight for a world beyond Hawkins. Let's end this, kid.
Mother of God.